Hello, my name is Teresa, and I'm so happy that you're here where we can talk more in depth about how to brand yourself from amateur to expert as you're looking to find a job. So, today we are going to talk about things like your resume, your cover letter, how to engage in social media, prepping for the interview, questions to prepare for, and then what happens next. So, by the end of this workshop, you're going to know exactly what to include in your resume, why it's important, and how to do it. So, if you've watched the 8 biggest resume mistakes or listened to that recording, you've understood what not to do. And today we're going to talk about what you need to do, what you need to include in your resume, and why it's important. Next, we're going to understand the importance of your LinkedIn page, what information to include, and how to use LinkedIn to personally reach out to recruiters and hiring leaders. So it's really twofold. You really have to make sure that your presence on LinkedIn is memorable, and then also really think about how you're using it then to research who it is that you're going to be interviewing with, and then how to use LinkedIn as a way to connect and have conversation before and after the interview. We're also going to learn how to research a company and what to look for and what questions to ask. So this is really important when you think about landing that interview and how you're preparing walking in and how you're doing that research on a company so that you can engage in really good conversation with the hiring leader and recruiter. You're going to become a pro at behavior-based interview questions, which is something that most companies use. So we're going to talk about what that means and how you can prepare for that. You're going to understand the STAR model. And again, this is another model that from an insider point of view, really, really helpful for a job seeker and a candidate in an interview to understand walking in what this is. And it really prepares you to land those questions, understand those questions, and not just kind of sit and hope that you can answer what's going to be thrown at you, and then how you apply it during the interview. And then finally, we're going to talk about how to reach out after the interview and the importance of doing so. So there is definitely a science and an art to that piece. So kind of that after the interview or that post-interview, what it is that you need to do, and in that reach out, what's important to include. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about myself first. As I said, my name is Teresa Allen, and I have been in human resources for only over 20 years. I graduated. I'm from Iowa. I went to Wichita State in Wichita University, or in Wichita, Kansas. So I am a shocker. And that is when I started my journey on human resources. So I started as an internship at an aircraft company, then worked in a generalist role for a few years in Wichita, and then made my way back to Iowa to be closer to family and worked for a construction company, then went on to work for a media company, and now I'm with healthcare. And in all of those positions that I've held, I have been involved in all areas of human resources, from recruitment to compensation to employee relations to strategy and everything in between. And so what I enjoy the most about being in human resources is connecting with people and the ability to help people in their journey, whether that be moving within a company that they love and want to continue to grow with, or finding that organization that really meets them where they're at and really makes sure that they're able to connect to that company in the way that they feel like their talents are being used, and that they're able to connect to that company from a culture standpoint. And so the reason for this workshop or this guide for you is to really give you, as the job seeker, that information that I believe is so important, rather than just kind of spinning the wheel and hoping as you reach out and try to connect and get your foot in the door at organizations, but then also in that interview to really understand how you can spend your time and prepare and make sure that you show up in the best way possible in the time that you have with the organization that you're hoping to work for. So with that, we're going to jump right in. So we're going to talk a little bit about your resume and how you make that roar. So again, that 8 biggest resume mistakes, if you haven't had a chance to read or watch all the way through that, make sure that you do that, because that talks about mistakes to avoid. Today, what we're going to talk about is what you need to do. So now you know what you need to avoid. Now let's talk about how do you actually then build a resume that is going to get attention. And what you want to make sure of is that your resume is relevant, that you have an objective, that it's appealing, and then it's results oriented. So these 4 describers are really, really important that you want to ensure that you are incorporating into your resume. So These are your must-haves in a resume. So you really want to make sure that you include statistics, because that's really adds the quantitative data, and that's really important. So a lot of this does depend on the positions that you've held, but regardless of what that is, you really want to make sure that you're adding in that kind of value and those data-driven metrics. So if you've been in a leadership position, including things like your retention, if you've been in a sales position, hitting quotas, reaching budget, if you've been in, a finance position, really identifying, and depending on what that role is, but identifying, were you able to hit budget and what did that look like? And then things like productivity. So regardless of the position that you're in, if you led certain projects, you want to make sure to talk to that and the time it took from start to beginning. So really, really understanding and identifying in the positions that you've held, where are the stats that you can make sure to give that kind of data. The next area that you want to make sure that you include are things like soft skills. So what does your teamwork looked like, the kind of communication and the creativity that have been involved in the positions that you've held? That's really, really important. The next is keywords. So really making sure that you're incorporating keywords into your resume, because that signals your industry know-how and expertise. And this is an area where when you look at the position that you're looking to apply for, this is where you want to look at that posting and identify and jot down where are those keywords in that posting, and you really want to make sure that those are included in your resume. Next, action words. So this is something that you received in the email. So 185 different action verbs, but you really want to make sure that each one of your bullets where you're describing what you've done, that they're really unique and they call to attention, a way in which to describe what you've done. And it's also a way to start to help the recruiter and hiring leader see a little bit of your personal brand based on those action words. So that's really, really important that you want to have those key action words in your resume as well. You really want to make sure that you include relevant details. So you want to tailor your skill set to the specific job that you're applying for. So this is extremely important when you think about if you're applying for a couple, 2 or 3 different positions. This is where you want to make sure that your resume might look slightly different against each one of those positions, depending on that organization, depending on those keywords from the job description, and depending on those relevant details then you want to highlight that pertains and matches to that job that you're applying for. And then also your resume, another really important thing to include is that it's speaking to the company that you're applying to. So things like that company's values, mission, and purpose. And this is where, as you're doing your job searching, one of the things that you should be doing as well is researching the company as well prior to sending in that resume. And I know sometimes we feel like we're in a position where we're really just in need of a job. But I caution you on that, meaning that you're already looking for a job, so you might as well put in that extra effort to make sure that the company you're applying at is actually going to meet the expectations and the wants that you have in an employer. And you can get that when you go to any company's website, really looking at their values, mission, and purpose and understanding what that is, doing that digging. And one, again, it just validates for you that it's a company that you want to work with and work for. And then you can also use that information and you can make sure that those, again, looking for keywords, how do you look to incorporate that into your resume? So a really good example of this is if a company's values includes strong communication and teamwork, and you see that over and over again in the mission and purpose and values, then you really want to make sure that you're highlighting that in your resume and your cover letter so that it speaks to the company that you're already, they've already identified that you're someone that would be a good culture fit to the organization. Okay, so I threw a couple of examples in here to help you understand what a poor resume looks like and what a strong resume looks like. And this is going to pull in some of the 8 biggest mistakes, 8 biggest resume mistakes that I've talked to earlier. But you can see right here, just from a visual standpoint, it's really hard to follow, right? The key headers are kind of somewhat embedded into the resume. So you really want to make sure that you, from a formatting standpoint, that you don't center everything, you have it to the left. And again, you want to make sure that you're leading with something that's eye-catching. So jumping into qualifications and then having the software and education before you even get to the experience, it's really hard to follow. And everything just kind of melds together. So this would be an example of something to stay away from a standpoint of formatting, the way in which the information is set up, and then even thinking about, as you look through this a little bit deeper, the way in which this person is describing what they've done. It's more about, you know, the job. There's not as much about accomplishments and accomplishments in what they've done and or stats. It's more just about kind of overlay of what the positions entailed. So here's an example. So this is a 2-page resume. I'm a big believer that anything more than 2 pages, you're getting way too lengthy. But this, as you can see, is very, very different, right, than what we just looked at. So it's very clear what this person is looking for. So we have that objective right at the top. We then have signature HR qualifications or qualities, and then we lead into the professional experience. It's really easy to follow where the position was, what this person has done. It ends with the education and then affiliates that this person has belonged to. So really good example. I think it's always helpful to see examples of poor and strong resumes, just so you can kind of get a feel for what that should look like. Okay, so next is cover letter. So again, in the emails that you've received from me, this was another area that we talked about, that I provided in that, but really making sure that if you're going to do a cover letter, which I'm a big believer in a cover letter, as long as it's done correctly. So if you're just going to regurgitate what's on your resume and put that in a cover letter, it's probably not going to do anything for you. Another thing is when companies require a cover letter, that is when you want to really make sure that you're using this to really draft and make sure that you're being completely clear about what it is that you've done, why you're interested in the position, and giving that compelling call to action. So it's really just kind of up in the air as far as different companies and if they require a cover letter or not. I know some folks have asked me about ATS systems, and that's applicant tracking systems, that, you know, as those ATSs are looking for keywords, are they really looking at cover letters as well? Again, that is going to be company specific, but I can tell you, if you've done all those things we just talked about in your resume, and you've also included your cover letter, when that recruiter goes back to look deeper at your information, they also now have your cover letter. So it gives them that extra information before they even contacted you to get to know you a little bit better. So it cannot hurt you, again, if you're doing this correctly. This is one, to me, that's very similar to a resume. So very similar. If your resume has mistakes in it and it's not calling out kind of those areas we talked about in the way in which to make your resume roar, it's also not going to get looked at. So that's no different than a cover letter. It's all about the relevancy of the information that you're putting in front of the hiring leader and recruiter. I say hiring leader and recruiter a lot because it just really depends. Some companies have both. Some folks just have recruiters that they work with, and some just have hiring leaders. So it just all encompassing of just making sure that whoever that is at that company that's going to be looking at and reviewing your resume and cover letter, they get that first impression and they start to understand who you are before they've even met you. So next I want to talk a little bit about social media, particularly LinkedIn, because I want to talk about what the importance of LinkedIn does for you. So for example, you submit your resume and cover letter, and you know, that information is looked at and it's decided, yes, we definitely want to continue to dig into this person a little bit more. Most companies, I'm not saying all companies, but a great majority of companies are going to jump onto LinkedIn to find you. And so this is, again, another way before you have even had an opportunity to talk to the company representative that is going to be filling that position. This is another way in which they can start to do research and look at you. Also, a lot of companies do look at Facebook as well, and that's more for what are you putting out there, not necessarily about how much you're engaging, but you know what they can find on you, for lack of a better word. LinkedIn is more how have you represented yourself professionally, and who are you, what companies are you, or groups are you a part of, what companies have you worked for, does that line up to your resume, and what other information can they find out about you through LinkedIn that they weren't able to find out on your resume. So these are 4 kind of have to do's, I would say, on LinkedIn. And first is making sure that you have a great photo. And this should be a professional photo. It should be high quality. It shouldn't be a picture that you cropped yourself out of a bigger picture. Really needs to be not a selfie. So, get a professional outfit on. You can, again, a lot of people use their iPhones and they work beautiful, but make sure that you have somebody that takes that professional photo of you and get that loaded on your profile. I cannot tell you how often a resume, really stuck out to me, and I'd go on LinkedIn, and if I couldn't even find the person, but two, if the person had a LinkedIn profile and they didn't have a picture, it kind of honestly takes a lot away from the resume, because it's kind of like, wow, if you're this involved in what your resume shows, it's really really disappointing that we can't find out and see more, and that you haven't given that time to your LinkedIn profile. So that great photo is kind of that first visual that people that are looking at your profile see. The next is the headline. So really making sure that you use the space to showcase your specialty or your value proposition. So kind of going back to that objective that we talked about on your resume, you really want to make sure, again, what's below your name, and what is it that you're wanting to draw attention to, and make sure that you're being specific in that information. The next area is just make sure that your profile is 100% complete. And LinkedIn makes this super easy for you. They they kind of give you that information, and they walk you through everything. They'll even give you prompts that says like, this isn't all the way complete. So you really want to make sure that your LinkedIn profile is completely complete. This is another area too, where I highly encourage you, based on the positions that you've held, that you don't just put your position title, the company that you're with, and the dates that you were with them, but give some information about what it was that you did while you were with that organization. And then there's a component on LinkedIn where you can have recommendations. So I'm sure you've seen this in other people's profiles, and you can absolutely request recommendations from others. Sometimes you don't request them and people will just submit them. But this is an area where I highly, highly recommend that you look at getting some recommendations on your LinkedIn profile, because again, depending on who might be looking at that, they're going to see that. I think this is also a great example of, you might be at a current position, and you might not even be looking for a position right now, right? And maybe another company does have an opportunity, and they're starting to do some soft recruiting. So they're going out on LinkedIn and they're starting to do some networking and looking at their, companies are putting in keywords and seeing what pops back. I did this all the time. And so looking then to see where people have been recommended is also a huge bump for you, and gives you, again, that ability for a recruiter or hiring leader to see more about you without even having to come out and ask about that. So again, make sure that you're reaching out. If you've done a project with someone, it went really well, reach out to that partner that was on that and say, hey, would you mind throwing a quick recommendation up? If you've worked at past employers and there were, you have professional connections still there, and you're wanting them to maybe do a recommendation for you, it's an okay thing to reach out. Like, nobody looks at that weirdly on LinkedIn if you reach out and say, hey, would you mind throwing a recommendation on my page? I did throw up just a few examples here of LinkedIn profiles that I think are done really well. So Jenna Kutcher, she has the Gold Digger podcast. She's somebody that I follow religiously, because I just love her style and the communication that she has and what she offers. She has a really good LinkedIn profile. Liz Ryan, the CEO of Human Workplace, another, looks different than Jenna's. So it's another way to kind of look at and see how to make sure that you are representing yourself on LinkedIn. And then Dave Hollis, he's the CEO of the Hollis Company. So maybe you've heard of Rachel Hollis as well. So this is her husband. One of the things that you'll notice in all three of these is that they are not canned. So you can tell that they are about them. They don't speak in the third person. Their profiles are talking to them and the passions that they have. And that's what you should do too. So again, I think it's always nice to have some examples of what to look at. And these are three that I would recommend that you pop out and look at as you look to update your LinkedIn profile. The other thing that LinkedIn is really, really beautiful for are connections. So this is a great way that you can reach out to those folks that you're going to be, that are with the organization that you're looking to join, and it really sets yourself apart. So how do you make these connections? So what is it that you need to do? One is you need to obviously do some digging and identify, is the hiring leader and the recruiter on LinkedIn? So make sure that you're diving in, learning a little bit about the company, finding those folks, okay? And then as you're making the connection isn't just reaching out to them in the messenger portion of LinkedIn and saying, hi, my name is Teresa and I'm really interested in your position. No, like that's the absolute worst thing that you can do, because as you can imagine, you're not setting yourself apart. So anybody else that might be reaching out, that's kind of the standard. And so it's not going to be memorable. Okay. So you really want to make sure that you're setting yourself apart. And one of the ways that you can do that is not using the word I in the ask. So you're really providing information to them and you're making that connection, where I'm going to give you some examples of what that looks like. But it's not about I applied for the position or I think I'm a good fit. Okay. That doesn't set you apart. That's what like everybody does. So you want to make sure that you provide your worth if you're going to make that reach out. You want to ask a question, but you don't want it to be about the job search. So this is not about the job search or about the job that you're applying for, but you do want to engage in a conversation. Okay. We're going to talk a little bit about ways that you can do that. You want to be smart and you want to do your research before reaching out. So again, you're looking at the recruiter or the hiring leader's profile. You're looking to see, okay, what other companies have they worked for? Okay, who might I know at those companies? Okay, you're looking at different ways. So you're kind of doing that investigative information or looking for investigative information to learn more about the person that you're getting ready to reach out to. This is an area where you want to dive in and learn a little bit more about the company, because as you learn about the company, you learn a little bit more about the industry, and it kind of takes you on this Google journey to really learn a little bit more about those people and then the company that they're working for. You want to make sure that your reach out is short and sweet, so you don't want to go on and on forever. You don't want to give a life history. You really want to get to the point, but politely. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples of what that looks like. Again, another huge benefit to doing your research on these LinkedIn profiles is there is probably a pretty good chance that you are going to have some kind of mutual connection. It's kind of that game, if you've ever played at the seven removed from Kevin Bacon, right? That whole you can get to a place where you can find a movie that Kevin Bacon was in at least 7 removed. And so that's very similar to finding mutual connections. So as you dive in and learn a little bit more about those folks that you're going to be connecting with, if there are mutual connections, use that to your advantage. One being, you might reach out to that mutual connection and say, hey, this is the person then that that says, hey, I'm going to be interviewing at this place and be interviewing with, let's say the recruiter's name is Sally. Any insight that you can give me, right? So like use them that way. The other way that you can use this is as you're making that reach out to that recruiter, you can include that information. Again, now you've just shared something more about yourself. You want to make sure that the mutual connection has a good history and a good past, right? But there's ways in which you can take advantage of those mutual connections. And then one and done. So after you make that reach out, don't continue to stalk, right? So don't keep reaching out, re-asking the same question. Give the person some time. So it may be 24 to 48 hours before you hear back. Also recognize that you might not hear back at all. That is another area that I would take pause if I were you as the job seeker to really go, what does that mean about this company? Because if this position's open and they're looking to fill the position, how engaged then is that recruiter or hiring leader if they are not getting back to me, okay? And so it could mean one of two things. It could mean that they're super swamped and super busy. It could mean that they're on vacation, right? It could mean that they have not, they've not looked at your resume. It could mean that they have not looked at your resume in a way that they're going to continue to have conversation. So, give it 48 hours before you make that, another reach out, and make sure that you're giving them that chance to get back to you. I do tell folks that, if you've given it 2, 3, 4 days and you haven't heard anything back, there is nothing wrong with sending a follow-up to just say, hey, just touching base. Is there a better time that might work for you to connect, right? So again, it's all relative to that question or that reach out that you had. There's nothing wrong with sending a follow-up. I'm just saying, don't send, if you send it in the morning, you don't hear anything by 4 o'clock, it's not going to be to your advantage that you start reaching out to say, hello, right? That's just, then it becomes annoying. So here's some example reach outs, and this would be based on the research that you've done. So maybe based on the recruiter that that you found for the opening that you've applied for has, you know, really good posts on. So again, we're going to use that example of Sally. Sally has really good posts on her LinkedIn. And so reaching out saying, I read your post on XYZ and I have a question about XYZ, right? So you always want to make sure that you're doing something engaging. So in this case, if you would have just said, I read your post on XYZ, I read a similar post, you know, I read a similar article about this, and I completely agree with, you know, what you put out there. If you're really not engaging for that person to reach back out to you. So you really want to make sure that you have something in there. So you're making that mutual connection. I read your post on XYZ. I have a question to you about whatever that question is. Now make the question relevant. Like really make sure that it's not something silly where it feels like you're just trying to reach out and make a connection, but really making sure that it's something that has resonated with you if you want to use this kind of an example. Another kind of a question can look something like, I see you recruit in this area, and I'd really love your thoughts on the job market. So maybe this is in your research, right? Where you're still looking to see and understand, am I even interested in this area? And am I even interested in this company, right? And so this is a great way to really reach out and make that connection before you've even applied and kind of get your name in front of that person. Now, again, you better make sure your LinkedIn profile looks dynamic, because this is an area, and I can tell you this from personal experience, that is the very first place that I go when I have cold reach outs like this. But I can tell you they're memorable for folks that are looking for your information and they're looking for your expertise to answer this question. So in this case, you would be asking when the person might have time to connect. Okay, so again, there's that question that you've reached out to. Here's another one where you have just recently recently applied, and maybe this is when we were reaching out to the hiring leader, and you say, I recently applied for the open marketing position on your team, and I'm looking forward to connecting with you to discuss the opportunity. In the meantime, I'd love to keep in touch on LinkedIn, right? So you're making that connection. This is one where you're not asking a direct question, but you're engaging with that person, and you're, without asking, you're saying, I'd like to connect, right? So this might be one where you're not just sending a message, but you're also sending an invite. Okay, so again, 3 different, very, very different examples. Just wanted to give you an understanding of how this looks when you put into place the different things that you need to think about and some of the research you need to do ahead of time before you make that reach out. So next, we're going to assume at this point you have knocked it out of the park with your resume and it was seen. Your LinkedIn profile is completely up to par. The recruiter, hiring leader looked at that and they're like, yep, this is awesome. You've made a connection through LinkedIn. You've had maybe a couple of back and forth conversations about whatever that topic that you brought up and brought into play. And so you've landed the interview. Okay, so you've gotten the call or you've gotten the email that says, you know, we'd like to schedule an interview with you. So there are a lot of things that you have got to do before the interview. And these next couple of slides that I want to talk to you about are really, really crucial when you think about what the hiring leader, recruiter, and human resources are looking for in candidates that they're looking to continue to have conversations with, okay? So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you are researching the hell out of the company website. You're looking at the About Us section. You're looking at even the career page, because this is the place where you are going to learn a lot about the company. So get a pen and piece of paper out as you're going through this and start jotting down what you're seeing. So that About Us should give you some information or find on the website about their mission, vision, and values if you haven't already identified that. If you have and you haven't written it down, again, before the interview, you're going to want to do that. You're going to want to go to the career page because this is where you're going to get a feel for the culture. Maybe there might be some testimonials out there from existing team members. There might be some videos out there that give you some information about the culture. Again, dive in and understand this piece of it. You want to go to the company's LinkedIn page. Understand as much as you can about that. This is also where you can look to see who else works at that organization. And a lot of times you'll be surprised. You might know folks through past lives, whether that be personal or professional, that work at that company or that have worked at that company. This is a way in which you can learn a little bit more about that culture and about the company. And I highly encourage you, reach out to those folks that you're comfortable with to say, hey, I have an interview. What would you recommend? What are, do you have any tips or tricks? Or if somebody's worked there and left, why have you left, right? So again, can't take it all at 100%, but it's, again, all tied to the research that you should be doing before the interview. Make sure you go to the CEO's LinkedIn and Twitter pages. So understand, what does that look like? What has that CEO put out there? What is that CEO talking about on Twitter? Who does that CEO follow, right? Who's connected to them? So really make sure that you do your research on the CEO. Same with the senior leadership team. So again, most times you can find this information on the website. So really make sure that you dive into, you know the names, you know their backgrounds. What does that look like? You're going to want that information heading into the interview. We talked a little bit about this with the LinkedIn connection. So you should have already done this research, but really making sure that you have that history on the recruiter and hiring leader. This is an area too where jump out on Twitter and understand what they look like there as well. Do some Google searching. So look to see what press releases are out there. Look to see what kind of information is out there. This is, again, another way where you can see information, current and old, as well as industry specific, that gives you some more information about the company. Then looking up that industry specific article. So looking up recent and relevant. So you want to understand, depending on the industry that you're going into, whether that be media or construction or healthcare, whatever that is, it's not just about the company, but it's also about the industry. Get clear on what is actually happening in that industry. Make sure that you understand the competitors. There is absolutely nothing worse than in an interview when somebody's trying to engage in a conversation, and I'm telling you right now, we can pick up on when, deer in the headlights is the best way that I can describe this. And if you're not able to engage in a conversation, and when I say competitors, I'm talking about relevant and should be known competitors. And if you don't know about that, it sends a huge signal that you have not done any homework or any research on the company. And then go to Glassdoor. So this is a place where current and past team members can write reviews of the company. And so look and see what that looks like. Again, I always say grain of salt because you don't know, right, who's putting that out there or what that looks like. But it's always good. Again, another way that you can get some information about the company. Okay, so you've done all of this information or done all of these things before the interview. And the reason you want to do this is because you want to identify 2 or 3 questions that you're going to come equipped with that you're going to ask in the interview, okay? So normally at the end of the interview, you're going to be asked, do you have any questions? So from a candidate perspective, when candidates say, no, I think I'm good, right there, it's kind of a little bit of a question. You can nail the resume, but if you don't have any questions, and it doesn't have to be most times when hiring leaders, recruiters, or HR are asking that question, yes, they are encompassing any questions about what we've talked about, absolutely. But this is your opportunity to showcase the work that you've put in and the value that you put on this company and your interest in the company, okay? So you've done all the research that we just talked about on the previous slide. Here are some example questions of why you do that. So 1, I know one of the company's values is, and then you say whatever the value is. How is that defined and demonstrated at whatever the name of the company is, right? So you're trying to find out culture here. You're trying to understand, okay, you say this, how do you define it and demonstrate it? How would I see that, right, if I came into this organization? Asking what's been your best moment at the company. This is a question that I can tell you from an HR perspective, like interviewing job seekers. I love it when job seekers are asking this question because it's their way of trying to understand what's the culture, what's the real scoop on what you think and what your attitude is, right? So this is your opportunity not only to showcase your interest in the company, but is your opportunity to interview the company as well, okay? Another question, what do you see as the most challenging aspect of the job? So again, a lot of times the interview is going to be talking about all the good things, right? Like all the accomplishments, all the things that you've done, but it's also showing that you're understanding like every job has challenges to it. So asking that hiring leader or recruiter, what do you see as the most challenging aspect of the job that you're applying for? Another question, what are the biggest opportunities facing the department right now? So you're making it very specific about the department of the position that you're applying for. Again, another way to start to ask and understand what that looks like from being on the inside. What are the opportunities that the department has? The next is, what's your favorite part about working here? Again, that gives you a lot of information about culture. It gives you a little bit more information about how that person then being put on the spot, what does that look like? What are they most loving about the company that they work for. You learn a lot when you ask that question. And then finally, what are the current goals that the company is focused on, and how does this team work to support hitting those goals? This is a great question as well. Sometimes on websites, they actually include the goals, the company includes the goals, or they'd have that on the career pages. So really make sure that you've done your research and the current goals aren't listed out there. This might be another one where if they are, maybe you name off one that was really interesting to you, and then asking that same question, how does this team work to support that goal? Okay, so these are just some examples, but now you can understand how important this is, because again, it's your way, twofold. It's your way to showcase your true interest in the position and the work that you've put in. And it really shows to the hiring leader and recruiter that you are really serious about this position, but it also allows you to interview the company. Now, I highly recommend you have 2 or 3 questions, and that is it, okay? You write them down, you bring it with you, okay? I'm not telling you need to memorize these. And then as the person's talking, you write down bullets, a few bullets of what they're saying, because in the moment, it might be a lot going on, and you want to be able to go back and look at that information. Okay. So one of my favorite parts of this training is giving you this inside track on behavior-based questions, because behavior-based questions are going to be more than likely going to be asked of you in the interview. And behavior-based questions, it's an interview technique that allows the recruiter and hiring leader to learn specific experiences and knowledge of you, the job seeker. And you as the job seeker, then it gives you the opportunity to demonstrate your potential for succeeding and adding value to the position by providing specific examples and how you handled similar situations in the past, okay? So it is one of the key areas that are focused on in all of my experience as a recruiter working in human resources, filling positions on my own team and filling positions within the organizations that I've worked for. Behavior-based questions are the #1 area that I've always focused on, and the companies that I've worked with have. And so I say that to you because a lot of companies do the same. So even in myself, as I've moved on to other organizations and gone through the interview process, behavior-based questions is what's asked, right? Because it is the #1 way for a company to further understand what it is that you've actually done and contributed to an organization, that really then connects to the position, and to better understand how you might position yourself and how you might actually work in the position. So what does this mean? So the STAR interview is an acronym for a way in which you set up your answers, and what the recruiter and the interviewer are looking for, or the recruiter and or the hiring leader are looking for in the answers that you're giving. So it's this technique that's used that we're looking for in the behavior-based questions. And therefore, it's really important that as the questions being asked to you, that you're listening to them so that you can walk through and answer the question in this kind of format. So the first is, you want to make sure that you're answering what the situation is. So you want to give a specific event or a situation. You don't want to generalize, but you really want to provide that information and describe the event or situation that you were in. Okay, that's the first thing that you're going to want to do as you're answering behavior-based questions. The second is you want to describe the task or the goal that you were working towards. Explain that task that you had to complete. Okay? The next is you want to describe the action that you took. This is specific actions that you took to complete the task. Okay? This is all about you, describing the actions that you took to address the situation. And finally, the result. So you're going to describe the outcome of your action or share the results of your efforts. Okay? So a couple of things to think about is, I want you, before the interview, I want you to go back to the job posting, and I want you to write down all of the keywords that you see in that job posting that are keywords, okay? And the reason I want you to do that is because what you're writing down in those keywords are, what are some of the skills that the posting says that the position's looking for? What's the experience that it shows is required for the position? And then what you're going to do is you are going to consider specific examples that you've had when you've displayed either using that skill or the experience that's listed in that job description. Okay, you want to think about what are the specific examples in your life? So mostly from a professional standpoint, I'm going to give you a couple examples of behavior-based questions, but you're really going to sit in that and really think about, okay, what is a specific example of, I'm just going to use teamwork, for example. If you see that, you know, you're working within a team for a job posting states, you're going to be working in a team. So what is a specific example of when I've worked in a team? Okay. And then you're going to take that example and you're going to say, okay, what was that actual situation that I'm talking about? So it's not I worked in a team. It's what's the actual situation that you're talking about? We're working on a project. You know, what did that look like? Were you working towards a goal together? Whatever that was, the task, so the goal that you were working towards, the action that you took to address whatever that was, and then the result that came out of that. The number one thing that I want to make sure that you understand is behavior-based questions or behavior-based interviewing is about you. So we, meaning the interviewer, the recruiter, the HR, the hiring leader, whoever it is that's interviewing you, they want to get information about you. So when you generalize or you answer these questions from a place of we, more than likely you're going to get some follow-up questions because the intent of these is to understand your experience. Okay, so a couple of examples of behavior-based questions. Tell me about a time when you had to complete a task with a tight deadline. That's a really good question that you might get asked. And so again, you're answering the question in this format. You're talking about the actual situation. You're talking about the goal that you were working towards, the task that was at hand for you. You're talking about the action that you took to address that. And then you're providing the results based on that. Okay. And in this, you don't need to articulate, okay, the situation was this, and the task was this, and the action that I took was this, and the results were this. I'm giving you this behind the curtain look at, as the person who's interviewing you, this is what they're looking for, okay? So in your prep for the interview, this is absolutely where you want to spend your time practicing and thinking about and being prepared for different situations that you've been exposed to. And a lot of the answers to what questions might they ask me, it's going to be in the job posting because of those, again, the skills that's listed that's needed, the qualifications that's listed, what are they looking for? What are the abilities that they're looking for that are indicated into the job description, that job posting? That's then where those keywords tie you back to, okay, wait, a deadline. Let me think a little bit more about a deadline. Okay, it says it's fast paced. When's the time when I've been in a fast paced environment, right? So that is how you're going to practice and learn about this. So we talked about the deadline question. Another is, what do you do if you feel that a team member isn't contributing to the workload? So again, if it's more of a team-based position, that really be ready for that question, okay? And you really want to think about, how do I want to answer that question? Because if you say that I'm a team player and I like to work as a team, and you've had situations in the past, this is a way in which recruiters and hiring leaders are looking at their true core, that you're not just saying one thing, but you've actually done another thing. So you really want to think about, what example do you want to give? What was that task? What's the action you took? And then what was the result from that? Another question, tell me about a time when you showed initiative on the job. Okay. So again, most of them will start with, tell me about a time when, or can you give me an example of when, right? But more than likely, if you have a pre-interview, you're going to get a lot of questions. It's going to ask you to talk about your resume. You're going to get a lot of questions if you've, they want more information about, what they've already seen on the resume. They want you to go a little bit further. But in that interview, you may have a few questions like that, but otherwise you're going to dive in. Most companies are going to dive in this way because that's the way that we're taught, to be honest, like the way in which you get to the place of really understanding what that person can bring to your company. Okay, so you are ready for the interview if you've done your research. So you've done your research on the company, you've done your research on the interviewers because you know who those people are going to be. You have your questions ready, right? You have those 2 or 3 questions ready, and you have your resume printed. So again, knowing heading in how many people are going to be interviewing you, whether it be a panel interview or you have 3 different interviews, each with 1 person, just make sure that you have some resumes printed. Yep, more than likely they have them with you, but it shows that you're prepared and that you care. So that's 1. The next is practice, and more practice on interviewing or answering those behavior-based questions. I can't tell you enough. If you are not used to answering questions in this way or answering interview questions, and or you haven't interviewed in a while, and or you've interviewed recently and you just are not landing it, really think about the kinds of questions you were asked, and I want you to go back and practice the behavior-based questions, answering those behavior-based questions using the STAR method, which is situation, task, action, and results, okay? The next is you've done a dry run. So you've driven to the interview location around the time when your interview is going to be so that you can account for traffic. You have your outfit ready. So these are really basic things, but I'm telling you, get your outfit out the night before, make sure that it is steamed or whatever needs to happen, all the way down to your shoes and socks. More than likely, you're going to be nervous anyway. If your interview's in the middle of the day, then make sure that you just have your outfit out that you would naturally wear to work. Make sure that it looks professional. One thing that I get asked a lot is how should I dress for an interview, not knowing what the, what people actually wear there. So if it's a super casual environment, you showing up in normal professional wear, not jeans, is not going to be weird. And if it's not, if it's more of a business professional, then you, either way, you are positive in making sure that you're making that really good first impression. Okay. And then make sure that you practice. So I'm going to say again, you need to practice some more because you have got to be comfortable answering those questions. You have got to be comfortable being able to articulate things about the company from press releases or industry specific information. So I can't stress enough how important practicing is. So the day of the interview, you want to make sure that you arrive early, but no more than 10 minutes. So you've done that dry run, right? You don't have to account for any of that. If you get there a little bit early, just sit out in the parking lot for a little bit. And I say that because more than likely, that person is obviously working and doing other things. And so the only thing that it does for you is it makes you more nervous. Okay. So make sure that you are around that 10 minutes early. When you do your introductions, make sure that you collect business cards. And we're going to talk about this in just a second. Because you're going to use that post-interview. So when you do those reach outs, we're going to talk about what those reach outs should look like. But I can tell you one of the things that's always kind of weird at the end of an interview, and I think probably this happens more from an HR standpoint, but having a job seeker, a job candidate kind of say, hey, can you give me the names and the emails of all the people that I interviewed with? It's kind of weird. And again, it doesn't necessarily show that initiative that you asked at the time in which you were introduced with folks. So especially if it's a hiring leader or if it's leaders and or recruiters, they're going to have a business card or they'll go get you one. So when you're making those introductions, it's not weird to say, hey, by the way, could I get your business card? And then you don't have to answer that. You don't have to ask that question. Okay. So want to make sure that you do that. And then you're going to nail it. So you're going to have STAR answers. You're going to have ask those company questions, and you're going to take notes. So in addition to the resumes that you're going to bring a notebook, bring a pen, right? And make sure that you have those questions in that notebook that you want to ask, and make sure that you jot down those answers, as you're answering them so that you have something to look at and review after the interview. And then make sure that you ask the timeline and who's going to be in contact. So don't leave an interview assuming that it's going to be the recruiter, the hiring leader, or assuming that it's going to be the end of the week. So absolutely nothing wrong at the end of the interview, either asking that hiring leader or recruiter, hey, can you give me a little bit of a timeline as to when you think when you guys are going to make a decision on the position? And if I have any questions, who can I reach out to and who's going to actually be in contact with me about what that looks like? Okay, so you want to make sure that you ask those questions. So it's after the interview, and now you're wondering, what the heck? What do I do now, right? So this is where follow-up is really important. You really want to make sure that you send a thank you to each who interviewed you. This is where those business cards or that asking for, email during those introductions, it comes into play. The other thing that you want to make sure is that you make each thank you unique, because there is nothing worse. So I can tell you again, behind the curtain talk here, as soon as I, from an HR standpoint, get a thank you from a candidate, I am reaching out to that hiring leader and that recruiter and I'm saying, hey, Joe just sent me a thank you, and I'm forwarding it to them. And then I can't tell you 9 times out of 10, what happens is, then usually it's a phone call or it's an email back that says, oh, guess what? I got the exact same thing. So that now just takes away, yeah, you took the effort, but it feels canned, right? So you really want to make sure that your thank you is unique. Completely up to you if you want to do a handwritten letter or you want to send it via email. There's lots of conversation out in the world, in the professional world about that. I can tell you, you cannot go wrong by sending an email. It's going to be seen sooner, obviously, than waiting for the mail to come through. As long as it's unique and it ties back to the conversation that you had. It's not a book. You're saying thank you for your time, right? This is where you can, if there was something that really resonated with you, make sure that you include that in your thank you. If you learned something, right, make sure that you include that in the interview or in the thank you. Just make sure that you're making each one unique depending on the people that you interviewed with. The next area is waiting, and this can be really hard. So really want to be patient and wait. This is why that ask question at the end is so important, because you've been told how long it's going to be, right? And you now have to be patient and wait. Do not tap that recruiter beforehand or that hiring leader beforehand. Just don't do it. Don't send an email outside of that thank you, and then another email, and then connect on LinkedIn, right? Like, be really intentional about the time that you're putting yourself in front of these folks, and continue with that expectation of who they can experience you to be, based on those interactions that you have. Now, I will say, if you were told you were interviewed on a Monday and you were told by, end of day Friday that you would hear something, and you don't hear anything by Friday end of day, go ahead and reach out on Monday morning, right? And that can be via email, that can be calling and leaving a message and just saying, hey, Sally, as you know, still really interested in the position. I know you had said I'd hear something by Friday end of day, just following up to see if there's anything more you need, right? It's not just following up because you didn't reach out to me. It's just following up to see if there's anything more you need, okay? So again, that's the way in which you can connect if that time period has come and gone and you haven't heard anything. The other thing that's really important is that you should think about the interview. Review those notes that you've jotted down, and then jot down your thoughts, because this goes back to, is it the right fit for you as being an employee or a team member of that organization? Because if you've done all your research and you were super excited about what you saw and what you learned, and that interview really fell flat for you, or maybe those questions you asked, you're like, wow, I don't necessarily know that based on what they say they're looking for, that I see them doing that, right? Then you have some decisions to make about, is this really the organization that I want to be a part of? Because I can tell you, if you just go based on adrenaline of being excited that you're chosen, that's going to sneak up on you very quickly if it's not the right fit, and you're going to be going through all of this again, right? So really think about the interview itself, the people that you got to meet. How was that interaction? Did it match what you were looking for? What about those notes that you had based on those company questions that you asked? And what is that culture and team fit for you? What does that look like? And then I cannot say this enough, make sure that you're still searching. So there are lots of jobs out there. There are a lot of industries out there. There are a lot of positions. So do not put all your eggs in one basket. Make sure that you're continuing to look, because that way you have other things in the hopper, right? Should this position not come full through, maybe you have questions about really the fit for the organization. So now you've just learned something about what you're actually needing or what you want that maybe you didn't know before. And it might tweak a little bit the companies that you might be looking at are looking for to be a part of. And so you really want to make sure that you keep searching and you don't stop everything after each interview and just cross your fingers and hope that you're going to get the job and then start all over again, right? So you want to continue to put yourself out there and have those conversations. So we've done all the things, right? We've looked at our resume. We have a resume that roars. We've submitted a cover letter with that. We've landed the interview. We've done all of the work to prepare ourselves to knock out the recruiter or the hiring leader or HR, whoever that is that you're interviewing. You've done all of those things. And this is now the piece where I want you to share with others. So my Facebook group, Moxie Maker Squad, this is where I want you to share your wins. I want you to share your lessons learned. I obviously want you to share if you've landed the job. But the Moxie Maker Squad is a place where you can engage with other folks that are working on, whether that be career, whether that be their self-image, whether that be a relationship, whatever it is, areas in your life that can kind of mess with your confidence and mess with your moxie. And career, finding that job, finding that career is one of those areas. So I want you, as you're going through this journey, I want you to jump out to the Moxie Maker Squad and make sure that you're sharing all of this stuff, because all of the things that you're going through, I am telling you, there are so many other people going through the same thing. And there's something pretty magical about having that connection and being able to engage with others that are in that same place as you. I am always available if you have any questions. You can, again, find me on Moxie Maker Squad, the Facebook group. You can email me directly at tjallen1225@gmail.com. I am here for you. So if you have revamped your resume and you want someone to look at it, absolutely reach out to me. If you have questions on your cover letter, absolutely reach out to me. If you are trying to prep for an interview and you are stuck, right? So you're trying to get through this behavior-based question, mojo or mumbo jumbo, as you may look at it, and you need some help, I absolutely am here for you. If you want to just debrief on an interview that you had and kind of walk through, you're maybe just not feeling right about it, but you don't know what it is, please use me, right? So again, I am in this HR world because I love working and helping people. And I am so excited that you invested in yourself and you took this journey and you're starting to take the steps to get yourself to a place where you can be in a career that you absolutely love. So take advantage of this information that was given to you. Please reach out with any questions, engage on Moxie Maker Squad, and again, make sure that you share your wins and your successes.